how timely this conversation is about navigating design, with curiosity and conviction. And I think I was telling Kevin earlier, I'm still reconciling my relationship with design. How many designers are in the room? Okay. Architects? Artists? Wait, we got an architect where? In the back? Okay, raise your hand with pride. Artists? Art lovers? There we go. Design lovers? There we go. Cool. And so I was just talking to him about design and I have friends who are designers, architects, and they always talk about design's gonna save the world and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, yeah, I don't know if I agree with that. But, Kevin and I, we connected to a mutual friend, Dario Calmes, when Dario was at Harvard Design doing his master's. And it began to change my understanding of design and its function. It's not just about creating an object, but design influences all parts of our life. So that's kind of how I came to this relationship, this book. And so I think, Kevin, thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh, thank you, Larry, just for even reaching out.
Yeah.
I was literally teaching, actually a guest lecturer at a combined MIT Harvard class, and I see in the classroom Dario Calmes. I'm just like, what? Dario? So that I'm just so happy that serendipity has brought us all together, and for you to reach out and to want to do this and have conversation, it means the world. Thank you.
No, my pleasure. I think to start this off, your career spans engineering, design. We were talking earlier, you said you're working with a biotech startup, but then an event management company through your firm. Can you just, situate us in terms of the short story, how you got here?
I'll say that I had a creative inclination when I started in my youth. I drew for hobby, like I imagine many of us who enter the creative field in some way. I started drawing for hobby, but I couldn't necessarily connect it to a formalized path. And having been raised for the most part in the downriver Detroit area in the heart of the automotive industry, the pragmatic paths to take were engineering, business, factory work, and that was sort of the neighbor sort of worldview at the time. And my drawing, I just kind of couched it under art. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that was sort of the thing. And my drawing, I did connect it to the love of math, science, so engineering was that first logical step. So I entered the nuclear power generation industry as a first career chapter and cut my teeth on product on literally nuclear reactors. And I promise I'm safe to sit next to you.
That's sexy.
But just learning how to deliver a product, to get stuff over the line, to meet milestones, and ensure plant safety, worker safety, all those things. It was just like a heavy gravity. It made a man out of me, that first foundation of career. And then fast forward, a natural curiosity for business sort of crept in. Because when you're in engineering and you're having success with your technical expertise, the company will want to leverage that expertise over and over and over again. Just keep doing that for the rest of your career, because we're making a lot of money off of that. So in engineering, you tend to plateau in a way. And I'm starting to ask logical questions around what is the larger picture around engineering work. And that's when a curiosity for business sort of crept in. I didn't have any business courses in undergrad, it was all technical. So I saw that business acumen. Fast forward, I ended up at Nike. And now I'm in a world where there's business, technology, and now design, professional design, and I'm seeing it for the first time in practice. And so through some moves and some side hustles, I started to learn how to incorporate creativity into the formal path. So let me pause there. Yeah.
And so I guess, but to piggyback that, what would you say was the moment that helped you understand that, because I'm a believer that we're the sum of all of our experiences, regardless of what those are. So what was the moment when you said, okay, I can go beyond this singular path, one, but then two, the moment where you understood the importance of hard and soft skills, right? So you have some designers in here who may work for themselves, they may work for a firm. I've had conversations with friends who either are architects or designers at the firm, and are always pissed off at clients, right? Because they don't feel like they're the boss making the decision. So I guess in this journey, when did you understand that, okay, you need the creativity, but you also need to understand the business in order to truly be effective in your career path, I guess?
Yeah, when I would say it started when I was an engineer first, just that want to, again, connect the dots beyond just the technical concern that was right in front of me. It was, as an engineer, leaning over and asking if the marketing department needed any help with the next proposal that they were going to sell. That eventually would be under the charge of our engineering team. But to learn sort of the language of business, some of the commercial ramifications of whatever projects we were trying to get more of, that was sort of a first epiphany to get a little bit more agency and influence in how I could sort of influence the company course. It made sense to scratch that itch, scratch that curiosity. And then when design sort of fell into the equation, I just learned overarchingly the importance of fluency. Like fluency is the thematic that emerged for me around, I can't, even as a designer, professional designer, I can't have only empathy for that target audience that I'm designing for. I gotta have empathy for my teammates around the table. And in increasingly multidisciplinary situations, I have to have empathy for the business stakeholder, the tech stakeholder, the relationship holder, and be able to at least understand the languages. So I could really hear those folks, and then they can understand me. And I'm not just talking about a lot of design theory or technical theory for folks that don't care.
Why the second book? Like, why do you feel that not only corporations and organizations, but individuals need to understand the importance of that fluency and that nonlinear approach in order to, execute ideas, follow your dreams, whatever that may be, but just really, truly be effective, and I think also just be a radical change maker, I guess. Particularly like in this climate where like, if you're a creative, everything is kind of like a question mark now. Depending on, your point of view, your political point of view, you may or may not be getting that call from certain organizations now.
Goodness. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Honestly, the first book, Reimagining Design, was a provocation around challenging the precedent. So if you agree that today's complexity requires us to form multidisciplinary teams, especially companies thinking about creating the next new thing that's eventually going to replace their core business, whatever it is, call that innovation. You need diverse multidisciplinary representation around the table to understand all the vantage points, all the ways to look at the problem and leverage that diversity to create a creative atmosphere to go about it. So think about the first book, Reimagining Design, as design at parity. Let's reimagine that design is so much more than the last aesthetic step in the journey toward that next big idea. That design can actually be involved from the very beginning. Again, not design in isolation, and we just beat our chest talking about how great design is. It takes the multidisciplinary combination to really spark the right level of creativity. So that was book one. But as I continued to navigate my own client-partner relationships in my present practice, and then watching some of the behaviors, even with the advent of design thinking over the last 10, 20 years, which has, to its credit, invited other disciplines into a creative approach alongside the designer, helps others understand the designer and their process a little bit more, and it teaches anyone from any discipline that you can be creative. You can have your hand in ideation and shaping something against the real need. But what I noticed was that a lot of teams would try to beat the risk out of that approach. If the process or the steps that you take to generate a new idea, a new solution, if that worked on this project, they want it replicated over these next 10 projects. And they'll literally call like the method that you follow the methodology, the one methodology. And when you get to the 11th team that stumbles and hits a roadblock against that, it doesn't work against the complexities of the world. they feel like they're in violation of the method. And so now you watch teams get so fixated on outputs instead of the actual outcome of actually making an impact. So to offset that formulaic tendency, the de-risking, that kind of kills creativity, more or less, there was more to say, I think, that warranted a second book. There was more to say around how do we get folks to understand the nuances, the richer complexities. Because again, if you believe you're going to be in more multidisciplinary situations, you're probably more and more, as we navigate into the future, you're going to be sitting next to a professional designer in your team. All the more reason for designers to have more courage in those situations and understand the choices that they can take, the nonlinear acts, the acts of creative courage they can take, but also the non-designers. With equal parity, you can be creative and you can better understand perhaps some of the nonlinear choices to allow us to navigate some of these situations that are ambiguous to a point, especially at this present moment. There's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of ambiguity, but how do we then navigate intuitively to a relevant, resonant outcome versus just checking boxes and saying that we're following a process?
Because I know that we're saying design, 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 and I think part of the challenge I've always had with it is sometimes it's situated as a catch-all, which is not necessarily applicable to every situation. So just for your personal definition, how do you define design and its use case in your day-to-day business? But then I think maybe offering people who work as designers, architects, artists, chefs, whatever, some seeds to think about design more expansively, I guess.
No, I love the question because there's sort of a from to in my mind. Because as I was beginning to understand design and how it fit into my world, I'm navigating all these different design specialties, especially with all the different professional designers that I encountered on the path. And I think digitization has exploded. Like, what kind of design do you mean? Is it industrial design, digital product design? Are you UX, UI? Are you both? Or all these things. But for me, when I get into the arena with teams, I just want to be perceived as a creative problem solver. And again, I didn't write my books for just designers, even though design might be in the title of both of them. It's really for anyone that's creatively curious. Anyone that's creatively curious that finds themselves in situations where they can actually have a hand in shaping what's next. And that's a lot of people. The analogous audience that I often point to is TED. Because anyone creatively curious enjoys TED Talks because you learn something. You can apply it in your own work regardless of who you are. And I think we all have that opportunity. I don't want to theorize how special I think design is, but I would rather convince all of us that we can be special in our own unique talents and bring that to bear in the work together. So.
And then for folks in the room who may come from a more corporate background or STEM background, because I often I work as a curator, independent curator, that's what pays the bills, but I didn't go to school to be a curator. My degree is in business management. I have a hospitality management degree. So I totally understand this nonlinear direction. But I guess for folks who, and I often get oh, I'm not creative. I'm not a creative. Creative is this thing. And I'm just we all have some creative kind of potential. What are some tools or rules of thumb that you've kind of identified in your journey that have helped drive this design thinking mindset that particularly will be helpful for someone who may not be in that environment every day, or maybe they are or aspire to be, I guess?
I think even in my early genesis of understanding how design could fold in, I think we're kind of victims to the clock. No matter what kind of product you're building and shipping, if you have the license to shape and affect the core business that's running already, and then taking it even further, do you have the agency to actually have a hand or a voice in shaping what is next? Call that innovation. the first conviction is like, who are we serving? And unfortunately, the speed of the clock, the speed of the machine, can almost be an implied authority figure in the room that says, you got to kind of follow your work plan. You got to follow the recipe that all stakeholders sort of believe in at the moment, and you just got to get your work done. But we end up having blinders on whether we know it or not. We have this myopia around just taking care of our work. But mind you, your target audience is out there in an evolving landscape, and there's all kinds of paradigms impinging on them day to day. And perhaps some of the things that they care about are steady, since the dawn of the time of humans. Mm-hmm. And some things that matter are evolving based on the impingement of trends. Like, think about geolocation. I might have been nervous 10 years ago to admit where I am or where I'm from, but I give my apps, the 100 apps on my phone, permission every moment of the time. So that's a shifting thing that matters, right? So how do you start by just asking harder questions about the target audience that you claim to be serving? Mm-hmm. And how do we fully understand context? How do we understand their circumstances? How do we understand some of the contradictions of some of the concrete realities that normal human beings have in their day-to-day that get sort of in the way of maybe their aspiration of what they want to achieve in their life, in their journey, in their circumstances? Less talking about ourselves as a company or a team or a project, but like really immersing in that person's world or that set of people's world. And oftentimes, I kid you not, 9 times out of 10, every project I encounter, that thick substance, that beyond just the data sets, the thick substance that drives people is often missing. So the first conviction I have is how do we go get that and get others who, regardless of discipline, again, creatively curious people, how do we immerse everyone in that world? So I've been in innovation projects where we took engineers with us to go engage people in the field. We took the business stakeholders, we took the clients with us so that they could understand how we cook with people and co-create with people. So the last part of the question I'll say is, when you take it beyond just the target audience conviction, I'm now to a point that I could care less what the brief is at the early outset. If the mission is innovation, that next new thing. Another mandate that I have is to encourage teams to open their creative aperture. So if you almost look at the future through a looking glass, like a distant time horizon, whether it's 1, 3, 5 years, I don't care. But if you're looking to the future time horizon, how do we open the aperture to appreciate all the different attributes of change that could be manifesting in the market? You got change as it relates to people and stakeholders. And usually it's never your just end customer in any business opportunity. There's all kinds of people in the ecology that you're having to deal with. What matters to each of those people? How can we really go after the thicker substance of what drives people and understand that better? Industry is another vantage point as you look through the lens. Especially in this time of disruption, uncertainty, generative AI, all the things, it's how do we not just fall victim to precedent and allow the present consensus of how an industry is behaving to inform what we do? Instead, why don't we just ask harder questions and question some of those foundational assumptions? Like, why does it have to be that way? Why does it have to continue that way? And what if we did this? What could open up?
But what AI? How many of you have used an AI tool or use an AI tool in your day-to-day? Show of hands.
Higher, please.
What tools are you using, just so I know?
DeepSeek.
Okay, any other tools?
Claude.
Claude, good one.
Yeah.
Just Copilot.
Copilot?
Gemini.
Gemini? Okay.
Any mid-journey people?
Wait.
Midjourney.
Midjourney, okay.
I'm using Notion AI.
Okay. This is just pure curiosity for myself. Copilot and Gemini. Explain this to me.
I work for Google.
There you go. That answers the question. But as we're moving forward, thinking about design thinking, I know last year I did a talk on AI and particularly in the art world, people were freaking out. How do you think about AI, its benefits, but its dangers? because I think we were talking about, bias, racial bias, it could be gender-related bias. How do you think about these tools, right? Because I want to emphasize that they're tools, they're not silver bullets. In terms of like design, but then also just kind of like that's like the philosophy that you're building, through your practice.
Yeah, I like what you said. It's no silver bullet. These are tools. They could also be pick your generative AI platform or even agent. These could be ingredients to inform an experience. I look at generative AI no different than I look at physical atoms or electrons or human services or content. It's definitely a paradigm that we should absolutely pay attention to. And I'll first admit, I'm no expert at generative AI. I'm learning just like everyone. I'm experimenting with different tools across my workflow, and it's also nice to see some of the capabilities show up in some of the usual software practices or platforms that I use. But I'm encouraged by those that are experimenting even ahead of me. For example, like my mentor who supported my books, who wrote the foreword for both of my books, Dr. John Maida, who's now head of computational design and AI at Microsoft. So John has a cooking show, literally, a cooking show on the Microsoft Developer Channel on YouTube. Literally like a play kitchen with play ingredients. He's wearing an apron, and he brings in guests. And literally, each episode is John and the guest making a generative AI prototype using Microsoft VS Code. And like literally in my episode, I was a guest on his show. I show up on the refrigerator screen of his cartoon prop, kitchen, and he literally used my first book as context to leverage the LLMs and to basically create a mentoring agent for would-be creatives that wanted to seek my mentorship but couldn't get a hold of me. They could use the tool. So we did that. Like he cooked it during the episode. You can go watch it. But Cozy AI Kitchen is the name of the show. But that's just an example of the vigilance around experimentation, just to figure out how can this stuff be useful. And so I'm optimistic about those kind of efforts. At the same time, I'm also inspired. I don't just get into an anxious mindset or put my head in the sand when I hear all the doom and gloom rhetoric around how this is going to annihilate humanity in so many years. And yes, the risks and the concerns are real, but I'm heavily inspired by thought leaders like Timnit Gebru and Monica Bilskite, who are coming at this from an ethics perspective or even a futures design fiction perspective, and reminding us today that there's people living in dystopia today on some of these issues, whether it's a computer vision algorithm getting, black and brown faces wrong, algorithms that are driving product that don't see our skin color the way they should. Pick your examples, but there are marginalized folks, underrepresented folks, vulnerable to some of the issues today around some of this stuff.
My question is going to be about the book and the name of Nonlinear, and there is so many processes out there, and there is so many shapes, circles, there is, and so I was just wondering what's is it a process, another process that to be added to the world of innovation and thinking? Is more about thought leadership, as I'm getting from the conversation, and what's the steps that maybe you would leave us with at the end of this talk?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. Is this another process to add to the canon that is design thinking or whatever? Honestly, it's an intuition that I want everyone to pick up. And again, I won't claim that it's the magic silver bullet. It's just a set of choices that I want people to realize that they have. To be going after that thicker substance that drives humanity, to understand your stakeholders better. Oh, by the way, the planet is a stakeholder. Let's not forget that, right? The choices around understanding what's a real insight versus just echoing consensus and boring people with your research outputs. And again, being very output driven versus outcome driven. Just understand the intuition that you can have to navigate that forest of ambiguity smartly. It's never one process. It's not a process, it's choices that you have. And ideally, it's choices that empower and enable every person around the room to feel like they can be creative and engage in a diversity of ingredients to inform better futures of what we could shape together. Because, not to go on a tangent, but I am very concerned about the mindset that I see in industries right now. I put a 2 and 2 sketch on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I'm sorry to even say 2 by 2 because it comes from the consulting world. But if you think about change, we've been probably the last several decades, at a linear rate of change. You could debate that, right? But I think with generative AI and the like, and today's climate, it feels like infinite. The insurmountable degree of change is just all over the place. So we're definitely in nonlinear times in terms of the landscape of what's happening. And you could either, if you look at the x-axis, you could either be defensive and cope with all that change. And that infers, like, some people might put their head in the sand. You have other people that want to take advantage of the confusion, and in a megalomaniacal behavior, they start to get loud with what they believe the future is. And these narratives become loud and bold and just noisy, and they drown out and they suppress other voices. But if we move to the nonlinear and someone is seeking to behave in a way that's offensive, that requires courage, agency, freedom, open aperture, then you realize that this is a mindset that I can engage in that is not zero-sum. We can expand playing fields. We can be more relevant, resonant. We think less about market funnel and clicks to buy. We think about what can we shape as a moment of truth to show up for people when and where they need us the most. It isn't them getting through the shopping cart. How do you show up for the people that you claim to be serving in a way that crystallizes a moment of truth for their own experience? And if you show up meaningfully, the business concern will take care of itself. The best brands, the best founders, the best teams have figured out how to do that, whether they know how to even describe it. So the choices that nonlinear represents, the intuition, ideally can breed a new leadership mindset for us all. And that, the last thing I'll say is, we have to get beyond our looking at ourselves as titles on a business card. You are more than the title on your plaque or your business card. You are a full human being with incredible skills and intersectionalities and lived experience. Think about how that can enrich, and if you give the teams the freedom and give yourself the freedom, think about how that can enrich the diversity of ingredients at your disposal. So instead of these loud, populist narratives that are so loud, let's come up with louder narratives that are resonant, that have evidence, that show possibility, plausibility. Like, that excites me.
One more question for the gentleman in the back.
Hey, Anthony.
Hey, Kevin. Kevin and I used to work together at BCG where we made a lot of 2x2 matrices. Kevin, I really liked what you said. Congrats on the book, by the way. It's awesome.
Thank you.
I really liked what you said about the age of move fast and break things being over. I was just imagining what some of the megalomaniacs we used to work with would say to that in terms of like pushback about stifling innovation and not moving as fast as we could. What strategies have you found most effective to advocate for a more responsible, ethical, inclusive speed of innovation?
I think it's taking steps to exercise acts of creative courage. Again, it could be making something, going to talk to someone, bringing someone that's already demonstrating traction in that space to the team of rainmakers, as they like to perceive themselves to be. But it's like, with all your ingenuity and all your smarts and all your wisdom, this person is already hacking the way forward. Why don't we listen to that person? And they actually have evidence to hold up versus a theory, versus a hypothesis, as we like to say. Bringing together a rich stew of ingredients, evidence, holding up and being able to sense make and create new stories, crafting new things to hold up and say, this is actually resonating with that set of people that we've claimed to serve, but we're showing a new pathway, and we're getting resonance from them. They're nodding their head like they want more of that. So then business team, like what are we doing to address this thing that's emerging? We'd be stupid to ignore it and go ship the next version of whatever it is we're doing today. So when we get those moments to show that and point to that, it's like you're holding up evidence. And 9 times out of 10, smart people don't want to turn down, or ignore good evidence. If they do, then it's like you have to ask different questions.
Well, with that, thank you, Kevin.
Of course.
Thank you guys for this. Our friend Jess is in the back from BEM. Kevin's book is available for sale. He'll be signing the books over here at the back table. Please hang out, have a cocktail. Thank you to Ludlow House, the team here, Austin, Andrew. Angel, sorry. Angel, thank you for helping us sort out the AV. And thank you guys for hanging out with us. I know the weather isn't great, but obviously, everything that Kevin had to say hopefully was nourishing and food for thought. We're here, so if you have more questions that you just want to ask on the one-on-one, please feel free. But otherwise, enjoy your evening. And thank you again.
Thank you for coming out.
Thank you.